Hi everyone. So Susan has asked me to answer some questions regarding coming home with a baby with a G tube and trach, and so I hope these answers help you. Um, as far as some advice I would give to families coming home with a child with a trach and G tube is to get organized and set up some sort of routine. And now organization, I feel like if you're able to get some of the supplies, the medical supplies, ahead of time, for me, I feel like that would have been a huge, huge help. Coming home with a baby after 8 months and then having 100 boxes all around the house and not knowing where any of the supplies were that I needed was a little overwhelming. So if you're able to get those ahead of time to set everything up and so you know where things are, I feel like it would be a huge one less thing to worry about when you come home. I don't know if it always works that way though, but the other piece of advice would be like to set up some sort of routine. I feel like children in general, whether they have medical needs or not, respond to routine. So if you can start to set up some sort of routine that'll work for you and your child, um, I feel like that was, a big thing for me. Um, I was still new at doing trach care, so I chose to do it while my other two children were in school. So that meant, in the morning after I dropped them off, I would give Ari a bath, and then we would go right into trach care after that. And then after his nap, before the other children came home from school, I would do the afternoon trach care until I got used to it, until he got used to it. So things change, your routines will change, but for me, like that helped having some sort of routine for him. The other thing would be is to set up some realistic goals. And realistic, it could be anything from trying to make sure that they don't get sick very badly over cold and flu season. So that was a big one for me. We came home right in October, right in the middle of kids being in school and cold and flu. So like for me, I did not want to end up back in the hospital. So for what I did was it was a goal for me to have a change of clothes ready for my kids when they came home from school, so they would change into their clothes and then new clothes, and then they would have to wash their hands. They were not allowed to touch the baby. They weren't even allowed to go near the baby until their hands were washed and changed their clothes. And if they were sick, they had to have a mask. They had to wear a mask. And it was tough, my kids are still young, so it was tough to like enforce this all the time, but I had to because that first year being home was really important for him to stay healthy and thrive and not end up back in the hospital. So that was a goal of mine, and it could be different for you, but I would say set some realistic goals for yourself. Um, and the other thing I would say is to not compare your child to any other child. In general, I mean, children should be compared to other children, whether they are a normal, healthy baby or if they've got medical needs. But I feel like even if you're going through something with someone and someone else is going through something similar, still do not compare your child to that child because they still are going to do things at their own pace. Definitely go to other people for advice and if you've got questions and stuff, because that helped me. But don't compare your child to their child because you don't know their situation totally, and your situation could be totally different. You just don't know. I feel like I was doing that in the beginning to compare my child to other kids that had trachs and G tubes, and it would just frustrate me. So don't do that. Instead of that, it's helpful just to look back at where you were like a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago to like where you are now and compare that way. um, as far as fears, one of my biggest fears was how was this going to change your life so much. And yes, it's extremely life changing when you bring home a baby with medical needs. It's definitely life changing because you have to change up a lot. However, I was more concerned with how I was going to be able to split my time between my other two boys and Ari, and I didn't want it to hold the other two back. I didn't want to stop, putting them in sports just because I didn't feel like lugging a bunch of equipment out, and I didn't want to stopped going on family vacations, and I didn't want to stop all that because we had a child with medical needs. And while a lot of people told me, it's just temporary and maybe you just have to change a few things for a little bit. Yes, we did change things for a little bit, but I didn't want to miss out on some of those things that we normally did, and that was like a big fear of mine. And one of the things I noticed as we started, going through this whole process is that my big fear with my kids and stuff, it turned out to be the exact opposite. They were the biggest advocate for Ari, and they participated in every therapy for him. He responded to them totally different than he would respond to me, my husband, and anyone else. His siblings were like probably 90% of the reason why he thrived. And so like my biggest fear turned out to be the biggest reason that he's thriving. He's climbing on the table right now. So I mean, it was just kind of beautiful to see all that. Ari kept trying to keep up with them. He saw them running around all the time and playing and laughing and, yelling and screaming just like regular kids do. And he wanted to do that same thing. He learned to, crawl while connected to a ventilator and walk and run and jump and play. So he's just your typical 2-year-old. And I give credit to my older children for that. It didn't hold them back. If anything, I feel like they gained such a huge knowledge of the human body and, why things work the way they do, and just being considerate. And, when they see other children with medical needs, like, it doesn't scare them. It just doesn't scare them anymore. Whereas before, I think they had a lot of questions as far as all that. As far as success, I just look at him and it's just one big ball of success for me. We came from being in the hospital for 8 months. He was born at 24 weeks. He was on a breathing tube for the majority of that 8 months. He was then trached. He never learned to eat by mouth. He never learned to suck or swallow or any of that. He never sat. He never did any of that. So when I came home, I had zero expectations. I had no clue how long it would take for things to happen and what, his milestones, like when they would happen. I had no clue. But every single task that we have given Ari, he has mastered. And whether it's, weaning down on vent settings or coming off of oxygen or weaning off of medication. He came home on 6 medications, and within the first 9 months of being home, he was off of all of them. So for me, it's a huge, huge success. I feel like all of that is a success for me, because when I look back to where he was in the hospital, like, it was just seemed like such a far-fetched dream of him doing all the stuff that he does now. Do we have more work to do as far as, oral stuff and feeding? Yes. Am I worried? No. I feel like he will get it. He's gotten it, all of everything we've given him, he's gotten, so I'm not too worried about it. So that's just big successes for me. He's just, took a few steps backwards and he took one big giant leap forward. So we moved on. We moved forward. As far as what I'm proud of, I would say, and I think about this all the time, I'm proud of me and my husband, and how we've handled this all. Whenever there's stress in the family, and this was a very stressful situation being apart from them. My husband took care of the other 2 boys while I was at the hospital. And then I came home and I was going back and forth to the hospital and also caring for the other 2 boys. We went from 2 incomes to 1. Whenever there's that sort of trust, it can either make or break you, I feel. And I feel like we definitely handled this with grace, when it comes down to it. We did get frustrated, and we did cry, and we did argue and fight and do all that kind of stuff, but in the end, like, we knew that this was our child and this is what was needed. And he told me from the beginning, you have to do whatever you have to do to take care of that baby while you're there, and I will take care of whatever I have to do while I'm here. And I've held on to that. And without any of those, without either one of us doing what we needed to do, this wouldn't have worked. And so I feel like we really handled it well, given the circumstances, and I'm really glad that we had each other's back for it. So if you have any other questions, please, feel free to ask, and thank you.